Very grateful to have, coming from Phoenix, Kerri, to share her experience, strength, and hope with us. Welcome, Kerri.
Morning, everybody. I'm a grateful Al-Anon. My name is Kerri.
Hi, Kerri.
Whew, nervous. It's good to be here. First, I want to thank the committee for asking me to come and share. It's always a privilege to be of service in Al-Anon family groups. My heart's just pounding. I'm so glad that vacuum is right there. It's kind of, I'm sure it's just silencing out the sound of my heart. Can everybody that has less than a year raise their hand in Al-Anon? I know there are more. Welcome. I want to personally welcome you to Al-Anon. We're glad that you're here. I remember when I first came in, it was so scary in the beginning for me to come to Al-Anon, particularly because I had been going to a lot of open AA meetings, and they were nothing like Al-Anon meetings. And it was so somber, serious feelings. Who wanted to be there? I wanted to be in the room with the sober alcoholics who was like, woo, let's have a party, you know. Anyways, I'm grateful to be here. It's funny because first I'll say that my home group is Principles Above Personalities on Thursday night at 6 o'clock in Phoenix. If you're ever in Phoenix, let me know. We'd be happy to have you join us. Last Saturday I celebrated my 19-year Al-Anon birthday. And that's awesome. Yeah, thank you. And, you know, my God has such a great sense of humor. Just so I didn't get a little too uppity because I was going to be coming over here the next weekend, I got some horrible intestinal bug the next day, and I was sick like all week, you know. And I was like, oh, that's good. That's humbling, you know, because I just haven't thought about this at all. And I think that's probably fabulous. That means that God, as I invite God to speak through me, hopefully that'll happen today. It's like coming home when I come over here, because I know a lot of you, and a lot of you remember, or may not if you're newer, that I started a program over here in the Pasadena meeting. I think it's a Tuesday night meeting. I don't remember the name of it. But before I get there, I'll back up for a little bit. You probably can tell I wasn't raised in Southern California by that little twang I probably still have. It's not much anymore. I was born in Sledge, Mississippi, a town 50 miles south of Memphis. Last night when the speaker was talking about Memphis, Tennessee, I totally related because I grew up south of there on a 500-acre cotton and soybean farm in the middle of nowhere. We used to joke and say we lived so far back in the sticks that there were sunshine pumps every 3 miles to get the sunshine back there, you know. But we didn't have a phone where I grew up till I was like 10 years old. I mean, there was no information coming in or going out. And, you know, if you grew up in an alcoholic family, you know that secrets were a big part of it. So that really added to the ability to have a lot of secrets because there was not much information going around. We lived next door to my grandparents, and my grandmother was the matriarch of the family, and she ran everybody's life. She was a complete untreated Al-Anon, and I just thought she was like so awesome. But that, you know, I didn't understand anything about alcoholism or addiction or anything until I was practically beat over the head with it when I was in my early 20s. There was no active drinking in my home growing up, but after I'd been in program for a little while, I saw that there's alcoholism all through my family. I was affected early on by the effects of someone's alcoholism like 2 generations before me. But because of the people that had been raised with the alcoholism were then the people that were raising me, I was profoundly affected by it. But when I arrived in the rooms at 24 years old, I would have told you that I never had been. That's denial. I think that's really prevalent in families of alcoholism. Anyway, so I was raised on this farm. We had a big farm. I would hunt and fish, and I was the firstborn. My dad wanted a boy, and I wasn't, so he raised me like one. He was real happy till I took that a little too far, you know. You know, I was hunting and fishing and chewing tobacco and playing ball and doing all the things that everybody did. Killed my first deer when I was like 9 years old, you know. But that's what you did out there. You didn't kill it if you weren't going to eat it. It wasn't like we just did it for sport. Driving tractors, you know, perfect. And so when I was 7 years old, my parents divorced. And I like to tell people that my mom, my grandmother, and my dad was one people too many in that marriage, you know. And so my mom had to go. Well, my grandmother was like larger than life, and my mother was a very quiet, meek person. And it's really odd because now I look back in my life, and those were the 2 role models that I had of femininity. It was like strong, aggressive, or kind of not real empowered. You know, there was no in between. There was not black and white starting early on. So my dad remarried immediately. I thought it was like 2 years. It was like 2 months. And the lady that he married was from what we call the big city. It was Cleveland, Mississippi. It's probably about the size of, I don't know, like, wouldn't even be a city to you guys. But but we thought she was cityfied, you know. She didn't even know how to cook cornbread, for God's sakes. But we taught her. She had a son that was 2 years older than me, and I didn't like her. She wasn't my mom. I didn't want her to be in our family, and I immediately rebelled. I was very smart. I played softball. I was good at sports. I was good at school. I was like the golden child. And immediately we crossed. We just didn't like each other, and she became, physically abusive. First it was emotional, and then it became physical, and she made me not tell. She said my father was gone out in the fields a lot, and he would be gone, and she'd say, if you tell your father this happened, next time he's gone, it's going to be worse. Well, I'm like 12. There was no reason for me to think that it wouldn't be worse next time. So I began to keep secrets, and I began to be the chameleon that some of you may be familiar with. If someone walks in the room and you think you're supposed to be a certain way, that's how you become. Or somebody else walks in the room and you think they're angry, you should be sad and or not be happy. You change your mood immediately. I learned how to do that, and so it was hard. I learned to cut myself off from all my emotions. And so when I was about 12, I think they married when I was 10. So when I was about 12 years old, I was out one night with a boy doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing. And actually, I had sex that night. And on my way home that night later, my stepbrother raped me. And that was really it just blew my mind, because I didn't know how to handle all these things at one time. First of all, I thought I would get in trouble for having been with that boy that I wasn't supposed to have been with. And that, to me, I didn't know how to prioritize or discern which of those was the worst that I would get in trouble for. And I didn't know that I hadn't brought it on. So for 2 years, every night before I would go to sleep, I either went to sleep before my parents did or tried to stay awake as long as I could for fear that he would come in my room. And he didn't for a couple years, but it happened again a couple years later. And that time I told. And my stepmother was very upset because my father made my stepbrother move away. And so that just it just got worse at that point. So then when I was about 15, my grandfather, who lived across the pea patch, who could throw a ball and hit their house, he died, and my father let me move in with my grandparents. It's kind of like, looking back on it, I know how an alcoholic family dynamic is. My father never really cut the umbilical cord from his mother. He was always very young, emotionally, and tied to her. And so it was almost like he said, here, Mom, have my kid. Your husband's gone. Let me help you with your pain by giving you my child, which probably wasn't the best thing, but it saved my life because it got me out of the house with my stepmother. And one of the hardest things for me to do when I got to the program was that whole God word you guys said. It just threw me off. I was pretty certain, being raised in a Southern Baptist religion when I was young, that if this was God, the program was never going to work for me, because I knew that I was going to burn in hell forever because that I was gay. And you guys told me it could be whatever I wanted, and I knew you all were lying, but I had nowhere else to go, so I'd come anyways. Anyways, I moved in with my grandmother. Things were good. I got a scholarship to go to school. I like to tell everybody I have a distorted perception. That's what the disease of alcoholism has done for me. So here's one of the ways early on I can explain it. I wanted to get a softball scholarship to go to college because that was like the thing to do. I was a good softball player. I had no ego or pride at all. My head was like this big, right? Wouldn't get through a door. And so they didn't have very good softball scholarships, but I had to settle for the 4-year renewable full boat academic scholarship. Okay. And I just thought that was like, I look back now and I laugh at myself because I was just so ill and I didn't even know it. So I went to college. I was there about 2 minutes, and I got into a relationship with a woman, and and I was, it was like heaven. I like to tell everybody that I was in one relationship for 10 years, but the faces just kept getting different, I don't even think the bed would be cold before the next one was there. And I didn't have very good tools for having relationships because, I told you already, my father was divorced like 2 minutes before he remarried. You just were in a relationship, period. It didn't matter if they were functioning or not, as long as you had one. That was the important thing. So I was in a relationship for a couple years. I met a gal that I liked. And I broke up with my girlfriend to go be with this girl because I didn't want to be unfaithful. And so after a little while that kind of petered out, and the spring semester, my senior year of college, my stepmother, who had been pretty abusive, let me back up for a second, right before, as I started my senior year, my father was living in Dallas at this point, and he had moved out there. We lost the farm through years of drought and flood and whatever. They moved to Dallas. My grandmother moved up to Oxford, Mississippi, which is where Ole Miss is, like a big town to us. And so I called my dad one day and I said, how you guys doing? And he said, well, not so good. And I knew that meant something was terribly wrong because my family we never like called a spade a spade. We kind of talked in circles, And he said that my stepmother was sick. And I said, do you want me to come out there? And he said, well, I don't think you need to. And that meant I needed to. So my girlfriend at the time knew the whole story of my family and growing up. And she's like, you're not going out there. And I'm like, yeah, I am. And if any of you know, it's like it doesn't matter how sick your family is, but I can tell you all about them, but don't you say one word about them, okay? So I was going to Dallas, Texas to see how things were. And I got out there, and this woman who had been very abusive to me my whole life regressed to a childlike state. And we found out that she had cancer in her kidneys, and it was actually all over. They wouldn't even do exploratory surgery. It happened at a time where my father was in between jobs, and he didn't have health insurance for them. And so what wound up happening was that, like, every time when I was around her, she didn't want me to leave her side. And, even before program, I could look back and see how God was helping me work out resentments that I had. I had no tools, but this is a way that God allowed me to do that. And shortly thereafter, my father brought her home to Oxford for my grandmother to nurse her to death. I was in school a couple of hours away, and I would go home every other weekend to be with my grandmother because it was taxing on the families. Because we could see this woman was, every time I would go, she'd lost more and more weight. She was a big woman, and in like 6 months, she lost like 150 pounds, and they had her on, morphine, just giving her morphine at the end, and she would talk almost like hallucinations. But I remember one time I went home towards the end, and they said, Kerri, she's in the hospital. She hadn't recognized anybody for 2 days. She's bleeding out her kidneys, and I took a bunch, people gave blood. We went and, helped with the blood bank and everything. They said, she's not going to recognize you. I walked in the room, and she said, hi, Kerri. And I was like, wow, it was so overpowering to me because it blew my mind. So I was getting ready to go to medical school. I was, straight A's. I could even, if you looked up golden child, my picture would have been there in the dictionary, And so I was getting ready to take the MCAT, and my mom's mom, who I was not close with, and my stepmother died within 2 weeks of each other, the spring semester of my senior year. My brain just kind of blew a fuse. I couldn't function. I didn't know what to do, and I'm thinking, med school, of course I have to, can't just be a regular doctor. I'll have to be a surgeon. That'll mean 12 years of school. Can't do it, because black and white, all or nothing, And so my girlfriend at the time was going to move to Los Angeles. I'd never been west of Dallas, Texas. I said, hey, let's go to AALA. Sounds like a good idea to me, Half measures availed us nothing. Yeah, insanity. And my family thought I was crazy, but my feeling was if I get out there and I don't like it, I can always come home. Her sister, who we were staying with, lived in, I didn't know anything about LA. They had an apartment in El Monte, okay? Yeah, that's what I thought after I got here and learned where it was. I was sitting there on the back stoop one day thinking, what have I done? What have I done? You guys find seats? They get you sit down back there? Come on in. So, I got a job pretty quickly. I got a job. It doesn't matter what I was doing, but I got a job. And so we moved up near the La Brea tar pits, and I had been working for about, a couple months, and I don't have any tools for communication. I don't really know how to do a relationship. Good Lord, I don't even know what kind of feelings I'm having. Am I having feelings? I don't know. I get a job, and I meet a gal. Now, I have to kind of paint this picture a little bit. You guys probably are not thinking about the fact that when I lived in Mississippi, we'd have to drive 2 or 3 hours to get to a gay bar. And it was it was just terribly underground back there. You couldn't allow people to know that you were gay, and even if they did, you didn't let them know. Come out here, y'all got a newspaper, you got a parade, you got bars on every corner. It was like a candy store, And I needed a sugar fix. So I met this woman. It was amazing because people were out. I remember being down in Hollywood one time, West Hollywood, and I saw down there is very role-oriented, butch femme. And I saw these two women who looked, well, you told me the word was androgynous, but I didn't know what the word was. It was like, I couldn't see a clear-cut role, I was like, well, I don't get it, And and it was very black and white, just like my whole life had been, So I had a lot of culture shock to live through for the first couple years. And I'm grateful that God brought me so far, that there were so many new things, so many different things, because I think I'm kind of a little hard-headed. I can't sometimes just get it the easy way. It's like God just has to crack me open like a cantaloupe, you know what I mean? And that's what happened when I moved out here. So after I went in that new job and I met that girl, I decided I want to date her. So I'm so upstanding, a little southern girl. I come home and tell my girlfriend, I've met someone else, I want to date her, I'm breaking up with you. Now, you got to move, Bludgeoning people with the truth didn't mean much to me at that time, So I broke up with her and started dating this other person, moved in almost immediately like I do. It's just, that whole U-Haul thing isn't very funny sometimes, because it's true. So I have no skills, getting in a relationship. That relationship is over pretty quickly. I don't know why. It just is. And so then I start dating this woman who drank a lot. I was in the bars a lot then because, well, I was out here and you could be, and that's where we all congregated and had a good time. And it was all about having a good time. And so I met a lady who drank a lot, and she had a daughter and a little baby. And she did a lot of cocaine, and we did a lot of partying, and that was great for like the first couple of weeks. But then, like, the party didn't end for her. She kept partying during the week, and then I was doing cocaine all night. I'm like, you've got to quit doing that cocaine. I mean, you can drink if you want, but you got to quit doing that coke. Thinking that she absolutely would do it because I asked her to, Didn't know much about, alcoholism and addiction, as I said. Anyways, that relationship ended, and through a convoluted series of events that I won't take you all the way through. You know how crazy we are when we break up. We got to find out all the lies that she said, he said, they did, he did, And so I wound up talking to someone trying to find out some dirt so I would feel better. And the woman that I was talking to was 2 years sober in AA. Well, I didn't know what that meant. Closest I knew was AAA, and that was some car club, And they said, no, Kerri, AA is where people go when they don't want to drink anymore and when they have a drinking problem. And I thought, oh, fabulous, she doesn't drink. Well, the first time I ever met her, I hated her guts because she was a bitch. But, of course, it stands to reason the next time I saw her, I would fall in love with her, right? Which is exactly what happened. We flirted with each other for a minute, went out on a date, and then we were married. Well, there are some people in this room who were there at that time in my life, and they remember how crazy that relationship was, completely insane. And in the beginning, like I said, I went to a lot of open AA meetings with her, and I listened to the steps, and I listened to you guys talk about God, and I listened to you talk about powerlessness and surrender and spirituality, and I thought that was wonderful for all of you. I didn't need it, And so we went to a lot of 10 p.m. candlelight meetings down at the AT Center. I remember those are pretty cool. And at one point, it started to get pretty crazy pretty quickly because she had a little issue with anger and expressing it or trying to not express it. She expressed it all over me. And having been the recipient of a lot of violence in my young life, what I understand today is that I did the same thing in my adult life that I did when I was a kid, and I never hit back. I used to always just roll up in a ball and wait for it to be over because then it would pass quicker. And so that's kind of what started happening in our relationship. And what I need to tell you, though, was I was addicted to this person. She would walk in the room, and my palms would start to sweat. My heart would start to pound. And it's not, I'm not kidding. I don't think I can tell you enough how I was physically affected by her presence. And so we would do that crazy stuff of like calling each other and hanging up and calling each other and hanging up like 100 times, I mean, okay, probably 50. And just chasing each other across town, it got nuts really quickly. And her sponsor suggested to her that I needed to go to Al-Anon. Well, right. So we were there used to be a meeting, a Kittredge meeting. There was an AA meeting upstairs and an Al-Anon meeting downstairs. I have no idea if it's still there, but I was upstairs at the AA meeting, and because I wanted her sponsor to like me, I said I would go to the Al-Anon meeting. Because you all have to like me, you see. How I feel about myself absolutely hinges on how I think you think about me. How I think you think about me. Not how you think about me, but how I perceive that you do. So I went in that Al-Anon meeting. AA's been rocking and rolling around me, and I go, and everybody was in a circle, Kleenex boxes in the middle, talking about boundaries, Oh, my God. Oh, my God. So I waited till the break because meetings out here were an hour and a half. I don't know if they still are. In Phoenix, they're all about pretty much an hour. But I shot upstairs, and I was like, I don't want to stay in there. She's like, it's okay, you don't have to. I don't think she really wanted me to get better either. And so, we were still doing the crazy thing. And it's funny because we had a third roommate, me and her and another person that had a nickname, because they were the same name, but I can't name names. And so I have to, for those of you you may not know, but this is the picture of our sober household. I'll come home on a Friday night, and our third roommate, who has problems like trying to kill herself all the time, she'd be laying in the floor having tried to slit her wrist. I would step over her and go into the back room, and we could yell and scream at each other before we got ready to go to a meeting, And it's just insane. I didn't think I needed it. Okay, so about this time, what happens is I was 24 years old. I went home. I'm not out to my family yet, and I was tired of living a double life because even though I didn't think I needed a 12-step program, I had been in here long enough to start listening about rigorous honesty and being who I am and not being ashamed of who I am and doing the right thing even when you don't want to. It was getting in, even though I didn't think that it was. So I inadvertently came out. Now, I was too chicken to like look my dad in the face and say I'm gay. So I told his new stepwife, which she didn't like me, but it doesn't matter whether she liked me or not. I told her, and as soon as I left, she told him, well, I'm in a plane on the way back from AALA, and my father leaves. He was like my higher power. He left a message on my phone machine saying, you're dead and buried as far as I'm concerned. You don't exist on the face of the earth. Don't call me. Don't write me. Don't have anything to do with me. And unbeknownst to me, he had gathered the whole family together, 2- and 3-year-olds, everybody, and told them not to speak my name in his presence, that I was dead and buried. Because he obviously felt responsible for who I was. Well, that's alcoholism to me, or the effects of it on a family, and codependency, which is all together. So I landed back down here, and I got that voicemail, and I was crushed. And simultaneous to this, what was happening was I was having the strange feeling that my partner was having an affair with our mutual best friend. And I was asking, and I was getting the answer, no, everything's fine. Well, I'm very cut off from my guts at this point. I don't know what I feel, but one thing I've learned, if your guts are to that thing that lives down in your stomach, when it's telling you something, it's rarely wrong. It is rarely wrong. And so it was finally confirmed to me that that was actually happening by that third roommate who just couldn't watch it any longer because she knew the whole story. And that day, it was probably late April 1989, I sat in our bedroom, or the living room floor up in Burbank, up on 6th Street, and the lights were on, but no one was home. Spiritually bankrupt. I was just dead. I felt like my family didn't want me. My partner was having an affair. I didn't know who to trust. I don't know what to do. I'm in this big city where I'm just freaking out, you know. And that third roommate had gone through a treatment program for codependency, and I knew that if I didn't get some help, I was going to kill myself. I've never, ever had a desire to take my life, ever. But I was so at my wit's end, no solution, nothing to do. I didn't know any other thing to do except say either get me help or something bad's going to happen. So I wound up getting into this 21-day treatment program. I had never had any therapy. That's a lie, I have to tell you the truth. I had one therapy session before that. And that lady, my partner, of course, was like a adolescence counselor. So for the two of us to go to therapy, she was a smart alcoholic too. She could run circles around that therapist. So we were going to eat her up and spit her out in a moment's notice, you know. So that wasn't going to work. I went through this 21-day treatment program, and essentially they pulled all my emotional guts out and labeled them all for me and told me everything that had happened. And they said, Kerri, when that happened to you when you were 12, that's called rape. You've never been able to put the word to that, but that's what actually happened. And we talked about a lot of the things that had gone on, and I began to see how the ism was in my family. We did like a genealogy, a family tree while I was in there, and we used different colored pens for the different isms, how it expressed itself, food, alcohol, gambling, whatever. A freaking Christmas tree up there, man. I had all these balls on it and everything. Colors. Some had 5 circles around them, 5 colors. And I was like, wow, I mean, sometimes I don't think that, when we come out of denial, sometimes I think the scales have to just be ripped off our eyes, and that's kind of what it was for me. Well, during the course of my stay at that treatment program, did I start at like 5 till 11? Oh, no, did I? Okay, good. So during the course of my stay, my partner would come up there in the middle of the night, and we rewrote all the rules for the treatment center, and they have to come out with a new rule. No visitors after 10 p.m. Monday through Friday, It was crazy, calling the cops and everything. So finally, when I got done there, they told me, Kerri, these professionals said, you need to leave this relationship because it's toxic. And I said, is basically what I said, because I needed to get out and get my fix. I don't know. I mean, I couldn't see her enough. I needed to get out. I was just crazy, and that's all I could see was her. I kind of understand when people talk about quitting heroin or alcohol, or how they have the desire to do it, or to satiate that craving, whatever it is. Anyways, I got kicked out of cars. I got my eardrum broken. I mean, there were so many things that happened in that time. It sounds like I was with her for ever. It was probably a year and 2 months. Really? It wasn't very long, but it took forever, it seemed. And insanity can be that way. Well, I finally, what happened when I got out of that program was they said, Kerri, you have to go to Al-Anon because there's no more we can do for you now. So I went to the meeting in Pasadena, and I walked in, and I had been hearing people in AA say, do 90 meetings in 90 days, get a sponsor, work the steps. I did 90 meetings in 90 days. I got a sponsor. I began to work the steps. And, I can tell you that I went kicking and screaming the whole way, and probably the first several months, we still were together. I hadn't left yet. I started a program while I was still in it. And we were laughing last night. At one point, while I was going to program but still in that relationship, my partner got really mad at me, and she was leaving to go work an overnight shift. And she said, if you and your stuff are here when I get home, let's all going over the balcony. So I called all my Al-Anon friends, and they came and literally moved me out in the middle of the night, And we call that the Al-Anon Brigade, She didn't think it was very funny, but I did a lot of crazy things. And so I do this because it's important for people who are new to understand, and so we can relate and identify with each other. I don't need to do those things today, but I needed to do them then. So I got a sponsor, started working with a sponsor, and I could see the unmanageability in my life. I wasn't quite willing to concede my powerlessness in the beginning. And they said, just keep coming. It didn't take long before I was able to see my powerlessness, So I began to do the steps rigorously. Step 2 hung me up really bad because the God thing, I could tell that something about my sponsor was very peaceful. When I first got here, I was so accustomed to living in the highest highs and the lowest lows. Anything in the middle I didn't identify with. I didn't recognize it, and what you folks considered serenity, I called boring. And so there was something about that peace that I wanted, but it scared the daylights out of me. It scared me. When I would first get in a meeting, like the first half hour, I would be sitting there fidgeting, and maybe about 3/4 of the way into the meeting, I could begin to feel my feet on the floor. I just had never been present in my own body. My whole life, I always wanted to be somewhere outside of my body. Because for the longest time, it didn't feel okay to be in my body. And so what I didn't know was, we talk about character defects being like, instincts gone awry. A lot of things I had learned had just gone to the extreme, but I never knew when they crossed the line. And so I started to do step 2. I have to tell this step 2 story. It happened probably a little bit after I had done step 2, but no, actually it was right around the same time. I was supposed to send a check. I had told the treatment program that the insurance, they had all worked it out. Only way I could go to treatment was to guarantee that for 18 months I would send a check for $316 each month. And I remember thinking, I can't do that. And I pulled my partner out in the hall before I admitted myself, and I said, I can't do that. She said, my sponsor tells me if I have money problems, I don't have problems. It's your life or saying that you have money that you don't have. It's not a choice. So I signed the paper. Well, sure enough, I start writing those checks each month to pay that bill. I call my sponsor whining, She says, go to a meeting, call me later, call those 20 people on your list that I asked you to call, God bless my sponsor. At that time, I don't know if people do that anymore, or they may still do it here, but my sponsor would have me call 1 or 2 different new people in the program each week, in addition to calling her. I'm sure she's so thankful that I did that, because I was calling her every day, but, So anyways, I'm writing checks, and I'm still living in trying to support an alcoholic in a manner that I'm not capable of doing, but I'm trying, and spinning, 90 plates at one time. Thank God I still had a job that I could show up to. And I went out, I remember the 3rd month, I sent the check to the treatment center, and I went out one day, and I was really having a hard time with this God thing, and I was on step 2, and I didn't believe that there was a God that really loved me, because I still couldn't get rid of that old definition of God from my childhood, who didn't like me at all because of who I was. And I opened the mailbox one day, and I'd been praying to my sponsor's God because I didn't have one, and I used hers. And I opened the mailbox, and there was a letter from the hospital, and it said, Miss Keller, your bill has been paid in full. Here's the last check that you sent to us. And in that moment, I knew that there was something out there that cared about me, because there was nothing in the world that should explain why this had just occurred. It was a miracle, and it happened to me. I had heard about them happening to you, but now I'd had one for myself. So I went, and I was so excited. And then now I'm up to step 3, make a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. Well, I was beginning to learn about humility. I didn't know very much. And I think about this time, I can't remember the time frame, but I was God was starting to do for me what I couldn't do for myself. And the girlfriend moved out to Redlands, so it made it a little more difficult to do the crazy stuff in the middle of the night. But I did for a little while. And then when she got married, it helped a lot, So by this time, I was really applying myself and really going to meetings all the time, every day for the longest time. And I took a service commitment early on. They were big about that then, and I'm so grateful that they were. In the program here for AALA, it said there's a little blurb about Dr. Bob saying, when it boils down to it, this program really is about love and service. It really is about love and service. Really, I think what the whole 12 steps are trying to get us to do is to love God, love ourselves, love each other, and keep giving it away through service. and continuing the cycle, So I'm working the third step, and I was beginning to have a little vague understanding or misunderstanding of what God was, but I knew that it existed, so that was not that big a hill to climb. I did my fourth step. My sponsor got all our babies together, and we went over and did it in a group, a bunch of different sessions, and I did my fifth step with my sponsor, and she didn't go screaming out of the room with her hair on fire, and it was pretty okay. And I was beginning to really feel at home. I never felt like I belonged anywhere until I came here with all of you. And I heard your stories, and I heard you talk about feelings. There's some people here that were in my original home group, and one of them who's not here, who's usually here every year. And she was always ahead of me about 4 or 5 months. And I would begin. When I got here, I had 2 feelings, okay and fine. Those were them. They're not feelings, but those are the 2 that I could identify. And so for the longest time, you've seen that little thing that the therapists give you that have all the little faces on it with the words underneath it for the feelings with the face. That's why I would have to look that up to see what actually I was feeling, because I didn't know. So I had to begin to learn what I was feeling. And I want to tell you that meeting down in Pasadena saved my life, as I recall it. It saved my life, because every Tuesday night I had a place to go, I had a job to do, and people to see, and people were going to hug me. When I first came here, I didn't like all this huggy stuff, let me tell you. But now, I mean, everybody knows me. I hug everyone all the time, and I'll forget, and I'll hug you 3 times in the same meeting, But I love that. It's what we do for each other. This fellowship just scooped me up and said, come on in, baby girl. It'll be okay. I had never, ever felt like it was going to be okay. And so I'm starting to do my 6th step, and I'm beginning to identify these character defects, and I'm not really fond of them, but I think I must be fond of them, because some of them I'm not ready to let go of, And so it's interesting because, 6 and 7 are very interesting, because in my life today, when I do 6 and 7, I realize when I get to the place of being ready to humbly ask God to remove something, I don't need it anymore. I can see how sometimes I'm attached to it, but I don't need it anymore. So when I get to where I can ask God, please take this from me, God is so generous that I usually get 100 ways to show me how I think I need that, so that I can choose to not do that action anymore. I had a sponsor, Kevin, last night, the speaker from Houston. It was interesting because, fast forward here a little bit, a few years ago, living in Phoenix, I had a sponsor out of Houston at the time, and he was coming. I had a sponsor coming to do a workshop with me at spring break, and we weren't in touch with other peoples in the city. No one knew that he was sponsoring me that would have known to call me when this thing happened, but he got killed in a car wreck 3 days before he was supposed to come. And another God story is that someone that knew us tangentially shot me an email to tell me that he got killed. This is how God works in our lives today, because there's no way I would have known, And drastic things happen in our lives, because life happens, but the program gives us tools to handle these things, I'm going to go back up here in the steps before I get lost. I made a list of people that I had harmed, and went to my sponsor with it to do my 8-step list, and I had all kind of people on there that she made me take off, because I still was a little distorted. There were people on my list that had harmed me that I thought needed to be on there, and she's like, no, honey, that's not what this is about. And so she made me put my own name on that list, because I had, for many, many years, I had become I was harming myself just as much as any of the people had done early on in my life, by the way I talked to myself, by the way I treated myself, by the things that I would do. I would deprive myself of things and give to everybody else. And I wasn't treating myself like the child of God that I am. I remember one time there was a card that had a child in the hand. It was a charcoal drawing. It was in the 12-step stores all the time. And my sponsor gave it to me on my 2nd birthday, and that's what it reminded me of me in God's hands. A little baby in this warm, caring, loving hands of God, And that's how I try to think about myself today. Sometimes I have to think about, if I feel far from God, I have to think about I'm a third person, like this person over there is that baby. And then I can get to it, and I can access the feelings and go on. Made the list. Going to make my amends. I made my amends to my mom. I hadn't been in my mother's life for a very long time. It was too hard for me to be close to her for a lot of the bad things that were happening when I was young. I would go visit her, but I couldn't talk to her about what was happening, because I couldn't open up and shut down, open up and shut down. It wouldn't work. So my amends to my mom today is that I have a relationship with her. We're honest, it's open, and it's beautiful. And she's a devout Christian woman, and the words that she uses in her religion used to send me running out of the room with my hair on fire. But they don't anymore, because I've learned through working the steps, be quick to see where religious people are right or right, make use of what they have. the words that she uses are just the way that she gets to the same place I'm trying to get. It was like the speaker was talking about last night. And if I can suspend my judgment long enough to see that she's just talking about a higher power, when I talk to my mom and I get off the phone, it's like I've been to a meeting. I feel filled up. It's beautiful. The presence is there with us, you know. And this is what I long for. The rest of my family, except for my father, the whole rest of my family I'm back in touch with. My partner and I go home. We go visit them. They open their homes to us. We stay in their homes, sleep in their houses. Okay, this is huge, I'm telling you. It's not funny to you, but if you were from Mississippi, you'd know how funny that was. They let us sleep in their house, you know. Don't put us out in the backyard or put us out somewhere else. My father, I wrote a letter to my father. For many years, I was upset with my father because he had disowned me. And I was hurt about that. Oh, I was hurt, you know. Big Al-Anon salute. I wrote him a letter because I finally realized that I was judging my father for judging me. And I was no better. I was accusing him and doing exactly what I was saying he had done to harm me. And so the letter came back, and I found out later that he never received it. I thought he had just returned to sender, but I sent it. And I don't know if he received it, and it doesn't matter because I sent it. Every now and then, now I send him birthday cards and I send him Christmas cards, not because how he's going to feel about it. I send it to him because I want to be a good daughter, and not because of how he cares or what he thinks about it, but because of how I want to be in the world, because I've learned to be a loving, caring person today and to try to take the high road no matter what happens and to continue to work the steps in my life. And I still do. You know, I go to 2 meetings a week. I sponsor loads of people, probably sometimes too many, but, you know, I don't think so. I mean, it all works out the way it's supposed to. I'm going to school. I'm doing a bunch of stuff. And, you know, I think that if I get up every day and turn my will and my life over to the care of God and get my will out of the way, everything that's supposed to happen today will happen today, you know. And so about a year or two ago, I got a letter. I sent my dad a birthday card, and I got a birthday card from my dad. I hadn't heard from my dad in like 15 years. And he sent me a birthday card, and I sat down and I cried like a baby, Because he used to have a nickname that he called me Snookum, and that's how he put in the card, Dear Snooks, you know. And it was just so sweet. It was so beautiful, because that might not seem like a lot to some people, but that was a huge move on that man's part. That was huge. He broke the ice. He sworn to not ever have anything to do with me, you know. And his pride is so huge, and it doesn't matter. I got the card. That's all that matters, you know. And Step 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when we are wrong, promptly admit it. That's a hard step if you do it, if you are rigorous about it, you know, because I think that we get to 10, 11, and 12, and we think, oh, these are maintenance steps. I'll just skip along, la, 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 you know, because, you know, we've already done that big 4th step, right? Well, excuse me. I needed them, you didn't. It's hard for me sometimes to recognize where I'm being selfish and self-centered. Because as Al-Anons, we're usually, for me, my selfishness is kind of covert. It's inverted. It's not overt like the alcoholic. It's kind of, well, it's easy for me to see when the alcoholic is being selfish. It's not easy for me to see. Because when I say something to get you to do something different, you perceive it as me just trying to control you. It's really, if you do this, I'll feel better. If you do this, I'll feel differently. So it's selfish, but it's cunning, baffling, and powerful, and it's why I still need to go to meetings, and I still need to work with a sponsor, and I have people in my home group to be accountable to, because they go, Kerri, you're full of it, honey. You're full of it. Stop, you know. It's like, what do you mean? And I like that. I need people that are willing to tell me the truth. One of the things that I tell my sponsees is, if I'm to do my job properly as a sponsor, there's going to be a lot of times when you're going to be mad at me, and it's not because I'm going to be trying to make you mad at me, but I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to love you enough to tell you the truth. Thank you. And so I try to do that. When I get through the steps real quick, I got 5 minutes left. It's important for me to always improve my conscious contact with God, because God is the answer. Every question there ever is, God is the answer. And no matter what it is that I'm doing, I have to seek the spiritual solution. And everything else will fall into place, regardless of what I think the problem is really about. No, God, it's not that. It's this. No, Kerri, it's this. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. I like that part about praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry it out. When I finally got to the point that I stopped praying for my will and started praying for God's will, the whole world got different. The conference theme, A New World, I was thinking it is a new world today. Because as long as I'm trying to be an instrument for my higher power to see how I could be a maximum service to God and to my fellows, it's a whole new world. each day I get up and say, what do you want me to do today? What do you want me to do today? Not what do I want to do? Because I'm going to tell you, a lot of times I want to sit down and watch a football game on Sunday, and I don't want to be doing things that I should be doing, you know. But I know how sick I can get rather quickly because of how alcoholism has affected me if I don't do the things that I need to do. Some people come in and they get to feeling better and they get to leave, and that's good for them. I don't get to leave because I'll be very sick very quickly. I know. I tried some field research about year 7, and it didn't work. And so, and why would I want to? People say, you've been here all this time. Why do you still have to go to meetings? I don't have to go to meetings. I want to go to meetings today. This is my fellowship. This is my family. This is where I see in the flesh a picture of my God. He's reflected to me through you. I feel you. You hug me. You're here. We cry together. We live together. We love together. I got sponsees that have, called the other day, her husband's got cancer, and we don't know if he's going to live. Haven't walked through that yet in recovery with anybody, but you know what? I'll show up for that woman because that's what we do. We help each other. That's what we do. Having had a spiritual awakening, as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs. When I first came in, I saw that I'm quick, I'm smart, I'm sure you all guys got that today. I saw the result of the working the steps as having a spiritual awakening. The whole reason that we're here is to have a spiritual awakening. And if I work the steps and do the deal, I will get that spiritual awakening, and I've had one. I've had a huge spiritual awakening. I'm an entirely different person today than I was 19 years ago. Thank God. And, carrying the message is easy. It's not hard because I'm praying for God's will all the time. So that shows me what I'm supposed to do is to carry the message and to practice the principles in all my affairs. They have a saying in AA, and I love it. Can't talk enough about service work and all that stuff. I do plenty of it. It's enough to say that. A lot. Probably sometimes too much. But the saying that they have in AA is that it's hard to fall out of the wagon if you're sitting in the middle. It works just the same for us. It's hard to fall off the wagon if you're sitting in the middle of it. Get in the middle of the wagon and let's go. And we're grateful it's a new world. Thanks for letting me be here.